Begin the current Daf, Mesech, Kesuvos Daf, Ayin Dal. Begins 7 lines down at the top of the Yomit. The Gemara continues the discussion of the previous Daf, which we had Machlekes Rav and Shmuel regarding Kitchal Tanai B'Konsa Stam. Now, in the case of the Kedushin on condition, and the Konsa, the Nisuin was Stam without specifying anything. Now, we had a Machlekes Rav and Shmuel if you need to have a get in that situation. Now, we had a Machlekes so far 2 opinions, we have a third opinion. We had so far 2 opinions. Machlekes Abaye and Rabbah regarding what the case is talking about. Abaye said the case is talking about one woman. You did Kedushin al Tanai, when you got the Nisuin, you did it Stam. What the halacha is that a Kedushin or not? Would you do it B'ez Nuz or not essentially? Would you be insisting on your original Tanai and say, oh, yeah, fine, if you have the Dharm, now the B is also going to be B'ez Nuz or not? And Rabbah said no. Everyone would agree in that case that you're insisting on your original Tanai, and therefore let it be Nuz. I don't care. Machlekes was what's called Isha Achas Ke'ein Shtei Nashim. One woman is like 2 women, which means that you did it 2 different times. You got engaged to her, divorced, then you did it with Tanai, and then the second time around you just did Knesset Stam. That was the Machlekes. But Isha Achas, everyone would agree that it's going to be that. Kedusha toys. So, some of this we're going to discuss in today's daf are continuation of this Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. In the case of, well, we're going to add another variable. We're going to talk about Kitchal Tanai B'Konsa Stam Ubal. Then we're going to talk about Kitchal Tanai B'Konsa Stam V'Loi Bal. We're going to add another variable that they did Knesset, they got married, but they didn't have Bia. The drasha of Rabbi Shmuel, and if he's boil shalei l'shem kedushin when there's Tanai, because he's not concerned with B'ez Nuz. Some of the themes that we said in the previous stuff are going to come up. And the reasons for an interesting case on Amud Beis, if she goes to Chacham, is mated in that she's engaged, but let's say she has mumim and she goes to a doctor and she heals after she's engaged, actually ain't not going to be engaged. So, we begin the current Daf, Ayin Dal, 7 lines down the top of the Yomit. Itmanami. So too we learned. What do it mean, so too? Just like Rabbah. Again, we had Abaye, as we explained, we had Rabbah who disagrees, and now, like Rabbah that he says that when you make a mistake with one woman, if you made it to Kedushin al Tanai, and then you get married, you don't say anything, Rabbah says everyone agrees you don't have a get, so too Amar Avach Bar Yaakov Amar Rabbi Mekadosh al Tanai Bal, that case that Rabbi Shmuel was talking about, which according to Rabbah they were not talking about. Because everyone agrees, if you did the Kedushin al Tanai and then you did Bia, you would not have to have a get. It's not a Kedushin, I'm going to keep it B'ez Nuz. However, his nephew asked on him from the following brayso. Chalitza mutaz. If let's say there's a mistaken chalitza, a misled, a deceptive chalitza. The Yavam was misled, but he did chalitza. It's going to be valid. So easy chalitza mutaz. What's a mistaken chalitza? So Rabbi Shloimy says, Kol Shomelei, if they tell him, look, chalitzla, let her take off your shoe and do this whole procedure. But talk about deceptive. They told him, that's how you're going to get married to her. And now, we got you. You did already chalitza. It's going to be kosher. That Rabbi Yochanan says, what? I learned the following teaching. Whether he's having in mind that this should be as chalitza. She's not intending. She thinks that his shoe is stuck. He says, do me a favor, my shoe is stuck. Can you help me get off the shoe? He asks his sister-in-law. And she takes it off. Or whether she's having in mind for chalitza. He does not have in mind. He thinks he went to skiing and he's just helping him take off his boots. Either way, chalitza's absula. The chalitza is going to be invalid, says Rabbi Yochanan, as his teaching says. Until they both are having kavanah, intent, for it to be chalitza. You're telling me that if he thinks he's getting married this way, it's going to be a valid chalitza? No. Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the case of chalitza mutaz is going to be kosher? Where they tell him, look, chalitza, do chalitza. He knows it's chalitza. On the condition, she'll pay you. We'll give you a nice, hefty sum. So, okay, you're going to give me money. Money talks. So now it's sort of saying that even if they don't give him, it's going to be kosher. So he was misled, but he knows it's chalitza, he has to have kavod. Okay, but one thing, he says the Gemara, Alma, so you see, even the oven maisam, if this man is doing an action of chalitza, stop. he's being meichelis the Tanai because wait a second, the Tanai was on the condition to give him 200 zuz. She didn't give it to him. So why is it about chalitza? Obviously, Rabbi Yechon holds that when you're doing a ma'isa, you're pardoning the condition. So Hachanam Hirosi, keeping the ball, once he's doing bia stam, achale tanoi, he's being meichelis Tanai, meaning he's not being mekadosh on the Tanai. You're telling me that what? Hamakadosh al Tanai ball. According to everyone, Rabbi Yechon is saying you don't need to have a get. Why don't you have a get? Because you're stubborn on your Tanai. Even if it's going to be a bia of his nose, what do you mean? You see Rabbi Yechon clearly saying that you're a meichel Tanai once you do a ma'isa. So that contradicts Rabbi Yechon's own teaching. Somebody said to him, Parpe Rav, yeshiva student, Shapa Kamrit, you think you're saying very well? The reason over here is not because he's being meichel Tanai. It's not true. People are very stubborn with their conditions. And even if it's a bias nus, says Rabbi Yechon before, of course you're not going to need a get because you're not doing it l'shem kedushin. You're not doing it l'shem kedushin because you don't want her to have this net and she has it. It's because it's not even a t'nai in the first place. The reason why over here when they promised him 200 zuz for him to do chalitza and he doesn't, they don't give him, it's going to be valid chalitza because it wasn't halachically a valid t'nai. It's because he says, Mechti, let's see, called t'nai, all the laws that there is such a concept in Jewish law of conditions, where do we learn that from? From the conditions that Moshe Rabbeinu made with the tribes of Gad and Reuben, where there's the pasuk says Lamidbar Perek Lamed Beis that he tells them, if you're going to pass over the Jordan River and you're going to conquer, then you're going to get Trans-Jordan. If not, then you're not going to get. Now, over there, was it not the Efshel Yomei? That was a condition that you could fulfill the action of the condition. Meaning, what was the action of the condition? Meaning, it was that you're going to get the land of Transjordan. Now that you could fulfill Adei Shlich through an agent. Ki Hasam, like over there, because Moshe Rabbeinu commanded Yeshua to give them the land. Well, he was Moshe Rabbeinu's agent, and he gave it to them. That's where have a Tanoi Tanah. That's when your condition is a valid condition in halachas of Tanoim, if it could be fulfilled through a Shliach. But if you cannot fulfill it through a shliach, like over there by Gnegad Meruben, that's not about Tanah. Chalitza cannot be done through a shliach. You can't tell your shliach, your agent, look, if that woman gives you 200 zuz, do chalitza to her. It has to be his foot, not the agent's foot. So therefore, you cannot have a Tanai at all to be mavatal chalitza because you can't have Tanoim b'chalitza. That's why Rabbi Yechon held it's chalitza mutaz going to be share. Says the Gemara, okay, well, what are you saying? Well, bia. But what do you do with bia? Well, let's say he's doing bia for the purpose of kedusha. You also can't do bia for kedushin purposes through an agent like over there. You can't say to your double, hey, do me a favor, go ahead, do bia with her. That way I can become engaged to her. And yet, we said in the previous daf, I'm having bia with you on the condition that my father's okay with it. And we were talking about there that tonight that we said, okay, if the tonight fulfilled the 900 or me, I thought you said you can't do tonight with something that cannot be done through a shliach. And you can't do bia through a shliach. The Gemara says, good question, but there's a special answer over there why tonight will work. That's because all the ways you could be mekadosh a woman are all compared to each other. It says a pasuk in the Baruch Chavdal, "V'hoislish acher." She's going to get divorced from one man, and she's going to be hoisa, the terminology of existence, which is what kedushin is, to another man. That means all the ways of kedushin of money, document, and bia of cohabitation are all being compared. So just like we know Tanai is affected by kedushin, kesef, and shtar, because that you can do through shliach. So that's why it's also effective with bia, only because it's compared to the other ones. But you're right. In general, Tanai will not be effective if it cannot be with a shliach. And chalitza, it cannot be done through a shliach, it's not going to have halachas at night. And that's why chalitza b'tar is going to be kosher. But that has nothing to do with hamakadosh al tanai ball in the tzrichim and again, because yes, Rabbi Yechon hold that you are stubborn on your tanai. It's not like you're meichel the tanai, it's just over there was no tanai, because you don't have the halacha validity of tanai, which has to be able to be done through a shliach. Now, according to Taisus, this is a third interpretation of Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. We had a Baya, who says it's by one woman of Kitchel Tanai, Francistan. Where Rabbi said, Nech, everyone, and we asked questions on him from all over that we saw, maybe we found an opinion that does not everyone. No, everyone according to Rabbah, would hold in that case of Kijal Tanai becomes a stam, that the halacha is going to be that it's not a kedushin, because you're stubborn on your Tanai, and you're not doing it l'shem kedushin, you're doing it, yes, let it be znus. Now we have a third interpretation. Amar Rab Ula, Barabba Amar Ula, Amar Reb Elazar. Elazar says, following teaching, a Mekadesh b'milva. Now, Mekadesh b'milva means to say that there's a loan that the woman owes him. He's a money lender. She borrowed from him. She owes him money. He says, do me a favor. Keep that money that you owe me and be engaged with that loan. Now the Gemara Kedushin Avam Bey says that's not about Kedushin. Because the moment he lent her the money, that was already given to spend. That's her money. He's not giving her anything right now. You have to give her something to make a Kedushin. You're not giving her anything. Because that's hard. She might have a debt to you, but you're not giving her anything. So therefore that's not a valid Kedushin. But the main point is, Ubal. So he made a Kedushin with a milva, which is not valid, but then he subsequently did a piyah. Or another case, Al Tanai Ubal. This is very similar to what we have in the previous Daf. The first thing was not valid, and then you did a subsequent piyah. So you had a condition, which is not valid, but then you did a piyah. Or Bapachim Shabbos Brut Bal. Or you did it with, let's say, a token less than a Shabbos Brut, and then you did piyah. So, says Rabbi Elazar, the call according to everyone, Tzrichem and again. You would require a get in that case. Meaning, even if she misled him with a t'nai. Why? Because a person would not make his biyah his nos, which just is essentially the way Abaya said in Rav. But if you look at Taisus, he says that Rav and Shmuel, their machlekes is only in the case of where kansa stam. Kansa means you had chuppah, but no biyah. According to Rav, okay, once you did Kenisa, you're already Meichel. In contrast to Shmuel, no, not Meichel on my tonight. But if you had biyah, according to everyone, you would have get because a person would not make his biyah business. So that's a third opinion in this machlekes how to interpret Rav and Shmuel. It sounds very similar to that of Abaya, but it's different regarding if you did biyah or not. According to Abaya, Shmuel would agree. Shmuel would hold that even if you did biyah, you'll make it nus. According to this third interpretation, no, he wouldn't hold you make it. But the question is, if you only did kansa, what the halach is going to be. Now, Amar Rabbi Yisrael bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Nachum, Amar Rabbi Ami. Says Mekadesh b'pachas m'shav pruta bal. Someone did kedushin with something less than a pruta, and then he had biyah. Tzrichem and a get. She needs a get from him. What? So Rashi explains that this Rabbi Ami that we're quoting right now disagrees with the teaching of Rabbi Elazar we just quoted. He says, Rabbi Ami, only in the case, because Rabbi Elazar said many cases, Mekadesh b'milva, Tznai, Pachas b'shav pruta. Rabbi Ami holds only the case of Mekadesh Pachas b'shav pruta and then biyah. That's when you need to have a get from the biyah. But if you did the kedushin with a loan or on condition and then you'd biyah, you actually would not need a get. What's the reason? So the Gemara explains. Baha hu deloi tai. Here is where that he wouldn't make a mistake that to think that less than the Shabbat Pruta would be Kedushin. Meaning, he realizes that that's a mistake. So therefore, when he's doing Biyah, he's doing it for the purpose of Kedushin. Aval Bahanach, but regarding the other two cases, he would make a mistake. Meaning, he thinks that she knows that there's no Nadarim, that's why she's getting married. So when he's doing Biyah, he's doing it with the purposes of the original Kedushin, not for a new Kedushin. That's like the way Abaye says in Shmuel. And regarding a loan, not everybody knows of this Kedushin, that's not giving anything. I'm giving her, she owes me $10,000, how could you even give her anything? So he says those two cases actually, the subsequent Biyah was based on the original erroneous Kedushin. That actually would not be a Kedushin, you would not need a get. The case of Babasha Pruta, people realize, okay, that wasn't valid. And therefore that's the case that you would require a get. Now, Amrav Kahan Meshmei De'ula. He says, Mekadesh al Tanayu Bo. He says, if someone does the Kedushin with a condition, which was not fulfilled, and then he does Biyah, Shichem and a get, she needs a get from him, which, that's the way Abaya explained in Rav, that ultimately you're not going to want to make your Biyah as Nus. And Zehah Yemaisa says when this was actually a story that happened. The sage does not have the ability to remove her from this husband without a get. Meaning we held that you need a get because Lamaisa, you wouldn't want to make your Biyah as Nus. Says the Gemara, Lafukim Mahaitana. That's coming to exclude from the following Tana. Because Amar B'Rida Mishmol, he says the name Bishmol. That's the Tana. But plus he says in the Midbar that if a woman laid with a man, a married woman laid with another man carnally, and it says V'hila Nisvasa, and she wasn't grabbed, so that's the whole parasha of Saita that she's asur, she's forbidden to her husband because she had an extramarital affair. Hanitfasa. But meaning if she was grabbed, she was forced, so then she's permitted to her husband. She was violated by another man, that would not make her forbidden. But the thing is, the word vehi is saying she was not nitfasa. The inference is, but b'yesh locha acheres is a different woman. She'ava b'shloi nitfasa, that even if she was not grabbed, with teresh, she's still going to be permitted to her husband. Meaning, even if she consensually had relation with another man, she's still going to be permitted to her husband. But he says, what type of woman is that? If it turns out that her condition were mistaken because the conditions were not fulfilled, even she has a child on her shoulder, as you tin them base, she could just walk away because you were never engaged, and therefore you could have relations with another man at that time, and you're not forbidden to your husband because he was never your husband, because it was kedushi al t'nai, which was never fulfilled. So therefore, we see that there is an opinion that holds that your subsequent bia would be a bia of znus. We're coming to exclude from that Tana to say that no. The Chacham said no. We need to. The person wouldn't want to make his bia of znus, never we require again. That's what we're coming to exclude from that. So again, we concluded a lengthy discussion of Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. We had three interpretations. We had Abaye who says is a Machlekes regarding if you would make your bia of znus or not. We had Rabbi who said that we're talking about one woman that's like two women where you divorced her, and then when you remarried her, you didn't say anything. And we had the third interpretation of Rabbi Lazar that said that we're talking about where you were kitchal tonight, but consistam, but you didn't do bia. That's the machlaikas. But again, if you did bia, everyone would hold that you would not make a bia as much. Now, talking about the brisa, continuing on this topic of the kedushin al tanai, that you don't want to have a woman that's not jonas, that has nadarim. Let's say holcha. Interesting case. So she knows he's not doing nothing with a woman with nadarim, and if he finds out they're not married. So she goes after they get engaged. It's l'chacham. She goes to the sage. He's mat to the neder. So Mekudesha, she's engaged. But there's another case that we say that the kedushin not valid if she has a mum. If let's say he makes a condition, I don't want no blemish. I don't want to find out that you got something going on, and that none of that. So she goes. It's a reife. She goes to the doctor after they got engaged. 2 weeks after the engagement, again halachically in Talmudic times they were halachically engaged. V'ripaisa, and he heals her from the blemish. She doesn't have the blemish now. She's not engaged. So the Gemara says, "Ma ben chacham l'reif." What's the difference between the sage and the doctor? Sounds like a title of it, what's the difference between the sage and the doctor? So I'll tell you what says the Gemara. The Brisa says, Chacham oikres anedem eikarim. You know what the sage does? He uproots the vow from its inception. How's he matter the neder? He opens up for her with regret. Let me ask you a question. When you took the neder, did you know that this was going to happen at such and such? And she says, no, I would never have taken the neder. So the Chacham says, you know what? Since this happened, it's like you never took the neder, and it's permitted for you, because you would never have done it. So this is not what you had in mind. So it comes out, when you were engaged, you didn't have the nedarim. So that's a valid kedushin. But the doctor doesn't make it like as if retroactively you didn't have that mole, didn't have that wart, didn't have that medical condition, whatever it is, at that point. It's only from here on. But up until now it was. Comes out, when he made the condition by the kedushin, he was mistaken, and therefore was not valid kedushin. Therefore, that's the difference between the Taras Chacham and the Refuah of the Reifin. But since we have a steer, because the time when the Brisa says Eitzel Chacham Etila, if she goes to the sage and he permits her neder, or Eitzel Reifin, but he goes to the doctor and he heals her, Eina Mekadesh, she's not engaged. So that's like steer of a Chacham on the case of the Chacham. So is the Chacham retroactive or not? So it's a little bit complex, but Amar Rabu, or the Ger says Rabba, says Lekash, not difficult. Why not? This Bryce that says that she's engaged is Reb Meir. The one that says she's not engaged is Reb Elazar. What's this talking about? So the Gemara explains. Remeir, the one that says she's engaged, is Remeir, the one that he says, ultimately, a person wants, or the way Rashi says, he's not makbid, he's not particular, he's not bothered by it. That his wife should be disgraced by going into the courts to the Chacham to be matter and neder. And Rabbi Lazar, but the one that says she's not engaged is Rabbi Lazar, the one that he says, in Adam Reiter should despise ish to the best. The person does not want his wife to be disgraced by going in front of the court. And therefore, he did not have that in mind, that she's going to go and be matter on neder. And that itself is not part of it, that's part of it, the to'os. And therefore that he holds is not a valid kedushin. As the Gemara explains Mahi, what's his talking about? Again, so everyone agrees you can be matter neder and malo afreya. But in that contingency is her going to the Chacham. Rabbi says, I don't want you going to the Chacham. I don't want to hear that you went to court and you went to the Rav and everyone's like, wow, what's Mrs. doing? Is someone doing this? No, I don't want that. And therefore that's a toys in the kedushin. And therefore it's not valid kedushin. According to Rabbi, he's not bothered by that. And therefore that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be a mania. So says the Gemara, Mahi, what's this machlekes of them? It's not like what the Mishnah says it's Gittin. Mishnah says, if someone's divorcing his wife because she's not on this, I can't take this. Every month to get done, another neder, another neder. So the halacha is actually lo yachzer. If he divorced her because of the dam, he's not remarrying her. Let's say mishum shemer. Let's say he's divorcing her because of the bad reputation. There's some words going around town that she was doing things with other people that are inappropriate. Lo yachzer, he can't remarry her. Now, what's the reason? So the Gemara in Gittin explains for two reasons, which is actually dependent on which reason you hold possibly. But there is an opinion that holds of what's called kilkula. What's the kilkula that could happen? If you say that he can remarry her, the problem is, okay, you divorced her because you don't want the najanas, you don't want a woman with a bad rumors going around her. She might go get married to someone else. Then subsequently they're going to find out that her classmate, who was so jealous of her, she spread all the rumors. Turns out, she never did anything inappropriate. Or let's say she had a neder, but it was uprooted through the chacham. Turns out she never had a neder. Oh, that's going to cause a kilkel. Why? Because this first husband's going to say, "Ooh, had I known that that's the case, even you would have given me millions of dollars, I would never have divorced you." Then we tell him, "No, buddy, listen up. You should know that if you're divorcing her because of a bad name, because of a neder, you cannot remarry her. And if she's so precious to you, like you say, don't be so quick to divorce her. And even if so subsequently he comes to be makalkal, we're not going to trust him because he knew that she was forbidden to him and he just wasn't so careful to check it out." So that's the reason why we say that he cannot remarry her, because we'll see makalkal and he say, "Oh, how did I know?" And turns out she was never really married to the second husband, etc., etc. Then there's a different opinion that holds the reason why he cannot remarry her if he divorced her because of neder or because of shem ra is because you don't want Jewish girls to be breached in these areas. So if you're getting divorced for that, you're not going to get remarried. So we're going to make sure they're careful that with arayis and with nadar. That's why you can't remarry her, because we want to punish. So we want to use as punitive measure that the Bnei Yisrael are not parrots in these areas. Now, that's what Tanakama says. Yudai Mehi says differently. He says, Kol neder sheyod b'rabim, he says, any vow that the public knows about, that she took this vow in front of 10 people, vir lo yachzer. Only that type of neder you cannot remarry her if you divorce her. So Rashi explains, because he holds that the reason is because of the second reason. We don't want the Jewish girls to be parrots, to be breached in the area of taking the dar. So when she takes a neder in public, that's a neder that you cannot nullify, as the Gemara says in Gittin. That's a huge breach in taking a neder. So that's where they penalized her. But if let's say the public doesn't know where you could be made for such a neder, you could nullify such a neder, then yachzer. Then he could remarry her. We did not penalize her. Which, that's what the Gemara says over there. He is not concerned for the other reasoning of Kelkula. Because you can still have Kelkul that. Oh, how do I know? Blah, 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 all that. He's not concerned for that reason. He's only concerned for the second reason. And that's only applicable when she takes the neder b'rabim, not when she doesn't take it b'rabim. Meir says, Kol neder shetzarcha kiras chacham, any vow that needs the sage to analyze it. Meaning, there's two types of ways of nullifying a woman's vow. Either her husband could do hafaras nadarim, which he could just nullify it, or she go to the chacham who could do the hataras nadarim. He could permit it, not nullify. How's he permitting it? Because he finds a loophole. He says, Did you mean that? No, I've never done that. Okay, so that means to say you never took it at end. So, a vow that needs the chacham, meaning that the husband cannot be made for. Why can't the husband be made for? He can't be made for any neder she takes. It only has to be either dvarim shebeinoy lebena, has to be something that affects the relationship, or either nefesh, something that's afflicting her soul. But if it's something that's not like that, you need a chacham to be matter. That type of a neder, lo yachzer. Then you cannot remarry her if you're divorced by that type of a neder. Why? Because he holds, like Rashi says, the first reason. The reason why is because of kilkul. So therefore, in such a case, there would be a problem of kilkul. Because he could say, oh, had I known that the chacham could be matered, oh, I would never have divorced you. And it turns out she was never really divorced. It comes out she was never married to the second one. Old children, mamzerim, etc., etc. Where this is the main point that Rashi tells us that the Gemara is not telling us. Because, of course, I would have wanted my wife to be disgraced in court and then have the neder permit for her. You see, he's not bothered by that point. So had I known, of course I would have wanted her to go to Bezin. So you see, Meir holds in Reitza should espouse the Ishta Bezin to go be Matra and Neder. Now, Rabbi Shloimy, he's the other opinion we're trying to explain, which the Gemara decides, says that this is not in the Mishnah Mesechus Gittin. He says, Echad Tzarach, whether you need the Chacham, Bechad Ein Tzarach, whether you don't need the Chacham, Lo Yav, so you cannot remarry her. But even if it has an A, he explains it in the next words. Amar Rabbi says, yeah, he holds both of them, you cannot remarry, but he explains why. Loi Asru Tzarach. They didn't say that it's forbidden to remarry a woman who is divorced because of Nadar. That it was a type of a neder that needs the Chacham to look into it to be matur. Only because of the real case, which is when you don't need the Chacham. Where the case of when you need the Chacham actually does not have a problem about kilkul, according to Rabbi Lazar. Because he holds that the guy cannot say, had I known, because he holds a person does not want his wife to be disgraced to go into court. So that wouldn't be an excuse for to say, oh, had I known. It's not true. You wouldn't have wanted her to go into court. So don't say that that's how you could be makal for her. So then why did they say it's usher, even in the case of when you need chakedas chacham? That's only because of atu, because the case when you don't need the chacham. Where he could deny and say, I didn't know that I can be made for. That's a case where he could say, I didn't know. Had I known, and this, that, and then he could be makalkal. So the geyser, the case of when you need the chacham, because the case when you don't need the chacham. So the Gemara is going to conclude in a moment and explain how we see over here in this brayso, this machlekes that we're trying to explain to resolve. If you go to the chacham is matur, is that going to be retroactively kedushin or not? But first the Gemara just clarifies one point. My time is Rabbi Yehuda. One of the opinions over here in the Mishnah, in this brayso, 4 opinions, was Rabbi Yehuda. He says that only if you took a vow in public, then you cannot be made for it. That's the type where she's parts b'nedarim. That's you cannot remarry her. What's the reason? Because the Kesuvos says pasuk Yeshua, so we take them behind him and Alf. The pasuk says, "Well, he b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people did not destroy the Gevinim. He nishbu lehem nesiah because the nesiim, the leaders of the assembly, swore to them. So you see that when there's a neder taken in public, you cannot be made for such a neder. Therefore, that's why Rabbi Yehuda is coming from. That's a real breach in the laws of the Nedarim because that has no hafar. That's a huge neder. That's where we punish her that he cannot remarry her. Now, how much is? What does it mean a neder b'ram in public? But not mitzvah when he says shleisha means 3 people. The reason why you see this is you find that the plurality of public is you find by the laws of ziva. When it says yomim rabim, that for many days she has dam. Yomim means plural of shnayim is 2, and rabim many days is shleisha. That's how she becomes a zaba gedayla. So you see that rabim means 3. Yitzchak says no, asar means 10 because edik symbol. When it says the pasuk Yeshua that you bring a source from the Sia Eda, and Eda we know as elsewhere in Shas Gemara explains, Eda Rahazais is the 10 miraglim. That's that of the Eda. Now the Gemara just concludes now what we were saying from Rabbah to answer the contradiction of Chacham. That is Remeah says Kol neder Chacham, any neder that needs specifically the Chacham to look into it to be matur, that's the type of neder that we said Liyav, you cannot remarry her. Rabbi Lazar he says no. To the contrary, actually, La Asur Tzarach elimination in the tzarach. Really, tzarach, when you need the chacham, should actually not be prohibited. It only is because of the case when you don't need, where he could have, and then he could come and claim and ruin her. That's where, that's the real one. That's the problematic one. You cannot remarry her. But because of that, we also made in the case of tzarach also. So, what are they disagreeing about? It's this point that Rabbi is saying Remei holds Adam Reitzah should disbase the bezin. The person who wants his wife to be, he's okay with her if she goes to the Chacham B'matan Neder. So I could say that I would have wanted, and therefore I could be Mekalkel. Therefore we tell him, no, buddy, you cannot go ahead and remarry her because you're going to be Mekalkel. Because you could say. And that's the case specifically by Chakiras Chacham. Rabbi Lazar Sabi holds, no, Einan Reitzah should disbase the bezin. The person does not want his wife to be disgraced. And therefore you can't say by the case of the Chacham that you would have wanted. It's only the case when you don't need a Chacham. Then you can say, oh, I didn't know. I thought I didn't know. I could. If I would have known, I would have. So that's the case that we say it's problematic and different because we also include the case of Tzach. But Al Kapon, that at least is like Rabbah that resolves the brises when she's engaged. Al Tanai that she doesn't have Nadar, and 2 weeks after the engagement she goes to the Chacham. That contingency is a contradiction according to one opinion of Kedushin, according to the other one not. Depends if you're okay with her going to the Bezdin or not to going to the Chacham. If you're not okay, that means to say our Kedushin was still mistaken. Because even though it's Oikir L'Mafreya, but I wasn't okay with you going to the Chacham. That still included me, not you want to have the net there. But according to the other pinholes, he's not bothered by that, so you're not bothered by that with the contingency. And neither are you bothered with the Nidar because she's Oikir L'Mafreya. That's the resolution of going to the Chacham Mimata and the Neder. If that's going to retroactively make it about Kedushin, or not thinking to any type of those things.